God damn it, I can't believe... Wake up!
No.
Luke!
What?
It's time to get up.
No, it's not.
You made an announcement video. And everything. You've been sleeping for far too long.
What are you talking about? It's been like 5 minutes.
Dude, it's been like 6 months.
What?
Yes! We're not even in the same place anymore!
Fine.
Were you sleeping on a bed of board game bits?
You're asking too many. It's too early in the morning for this.
It's 6 o'clock at night!
Oh, you're right. What am I even gonna talk about? Like, there's nothing for me to say. I've literally just been sleeping for the last 6 months. What could I possibly say? Okay, for those of you who don't know, I contain 30 games in my collection at any given point in time. I'm kind of a little picky about that, you might say. And that's kind of a big deal to me. Like, a lot of people tend to sort of have pride in having 100, 200, however many games in their collection. And I kind of find that to be a little silly and a little short-sighted. And there's a few reasons for that. But honestly, the first thing as a budget board gamer is cost perspective. Board games are expensive. On average, a board game is about $50 a pop. So if you average in 100 games, let's say a 100-game collection, it's $5,000, because I'm really good at math without looking at the screen. Cost perspective, both monetarily and from a taking up that much space in your house, apartment, whatever perspective, it's expensive. Reduce that down to 30, and you've got an $1,500 collection, generally, and it's going to take up a lot less space in your house.
I mean, yeah, but you've already spent the money on them. You have the closet space, and it doesn't cost any more to air condition 100 games than 30 games.
Yeah.
It's not like you can trade them in for a decent amount of money or anything like that.
Well, that's true. On average, you'll get about half of the MSRP when you're trading in. So you are getting only 50% of your original proceeds back.
Well, you can trade in your old board games?
Well, depending on your local board gaming shop, some of them will accept trade-ins. And you can also make trades online. I'm actually in the middle of making a trade of a couple of games for a few other games on Board Game Geek right now. I'm going to talk about that in a future video because that pertains to a completely different topic. But you can totally trade in games that you don't enjoy. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. Like, more often than not, you're not going to get much for what you're doing with it, so it's hardly worth your time or your money or any of it. But it can be useful as a sort of recycling tool to sort of change up your collection. For me, though, the bigger thing beyond the cost is familiarity with a game. So, like, 365 days in a year. If you own 100 games, that means you're going to play a game between 3 and 4 times a year. You're not necessarily going to be getting very familiar with a game if you're doing that. Like, if I only played Terra Mystica 4 times a year, I'd be pretty bad at it, and I wouldn't really get a lot of the nuances that comes with having a game of that complexity, of that, depth, all of that jazz.
Are you really that good at it now?
No, I'm not, but I want to get better. It's one of those games that I haven't played that much, to be honest, and I want to learn some of the nuances and the ideas and the meta of the game by pursuing it further. And so, like, if I have this ton of games that I constantly am cycling through, it means that the games that I think are good are the games I'm not going to be coming back to. Whereas if I have less games, it means I am giving myself the time to actually play those games more often and allow myself to become better acquainted with them. And I mean, could that collection exceed 30 games? Sure, but they'd have to be really special games. They'd all have to be games that do something unique. The other thing is that I only look for the best in my collection. So, like, if I'm going to own a game, it has to be the best of its kind. It can't just be, like, the games over here, I've got Scythe, which is one of the best area control games, in my opinion. I've got Castles of Burgundy, which is a fantastic luck manipulation game that I really enjoy. There are a couple of legacy games up there which I still have to play, so to be fair, those will end up cycling out. Legacy of Dragonholt and Witness is not technically a legacy game, but it plays like a legacy game before that became popularized. So, there's a lot of games in my collection that do unique things that I don't feel like other games necessarily do all the time, or that represent a genre at its peak, at some of its finest. So, I mean, at the end of the day, the 30-game limit is both to limit myself monetarily and space-wise so that I actually have the ability to do more things than just constantly try new games and cycle through my collection. But also, it's a way to sort of try and find what I consider to be the cream of the crop, Really appreciate the best that the industry has to offer. And that's not to say that there are games that are not in my collection that I enjoy, but some games I don't necessarily want to revisit all the time. Like Takedo is a really cool experience game. It's almost like a slice of life in a board game, or like the closest you're going to get to that in terms of like the journey and the zen sort of emotions that come with that and so on and so forth. But do I want to play that game like all the time? No, I'm going to play that game maybe once a year. Is that worth owning? Is that worth having in my collection? It's actually, I kind of want to consider talking about that in a future video. The reason why I wanted to do this absurd video is for two reasons. One, to try out this new format of recording. And I'm going to juxtapose this with a more traditional video immediately after this. But also, I kind of wanted to talk about this sort of very peculiar habit of mine, because it very much, I think, is significant to talk about in terms of my opinions on games and how I review games and so on and so forth. And in the past, I've sort of talked about being a budget board gamer, like, games can't be too expensive. But really, the expense of a game is justified if you get the use out of it. So if I own Scythe. Scythe is not a cheap game, but I play it a lot. But yeah, so I kind of just wanted to try out this format. I wanted to talk about, it's a really big part of it, and kind of it's important. So Chris O'Neill of Ninth Level Games actually recommended that I talk about this, because it's moving forward with videos. Let's briefly talk about what's coming next, because things are going to be a lot different moving forward than what I originally planned, because obviously it's been some time and obviously things have changed. What I plan on doing, if I actually get my together, is firstly I'm planning on no longer doing the Tiny Epic Games series, because I started looking at those games and the only one that I own is Tiny Epic Galaxies, and that one honestly might be making its way out of my collection. But like, I want to sort of remove that series because I don't want to necessarily have a series of videos that are just me complaining or like being like, well, this is okay, because that's not interesting for anyone, and I want to be interested and invested in what I'm talking about. So I'm just slashing that. I'm also moving forward with videos. The purpose of this is that I'm going to be a main focus of whenever I talk about a game is going to be discussing how a game is sort of going to affect my collection, whether it's going to come into my collection, whether it's not going to, whether I'm removing a game to add it to my collection, so on and so forth. So, thank you for tuning in. Let me know your thoughts below. I'm not looking forward to editing this, but I'm looking forward to seeing the final results. Bye-bye.
Maybe next time you should put some pants on.
No pants. No pants.
That was straight espresso.